Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and it's one of our In the Hot Seat. This time we've got Mitesh joining us from Well Space Architects. So welcome and for joining us today. It seems only like an hour or two we met last. In fact, it was because we were at the Phoenix meeting this morning at breakfast at Dishum. So welcome to, on the show.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, thanks for having me, and good to see you again.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself then. So where did you grow up? A little bit about your parents, maybe education, and what did you plan to be? Were you going to be a train driver, a pilot? What was the plans and what happened?
Yeah, sure. And please stop me if I waffle on a bit because I could talk for ages.
No worries. We're very good with the hook.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So I guess starting from the background, from the very beginning, I guess. So my parents came from India, in particular Gujarat. They came here with literally no money, and they grew up mainly around initially Lozells and then Aston. And then I spent most of my younger years in Aston growing up there. When I was younger, I used to like to kind of break my toys and put them back together again. And I have this one memory of having a toy airplane that had LED lights, and I took them all out, put it in a toilet roll tube, and made like a little torch out of it, and tried to make like a Ghostbusters backpack then with the cereal box. So I used to like tinkering and messing around with things. And I think
I was very similar as well.
Yeah,
I used to take everything apart. Usually I had some spare parts when you put it back together again as well.
Yeah. I got extra screw and where did that go? So I that's what I tend to do a lot when I was younger. And I think naturally from that, I liked kind of IT, technology, engineering, kind of that creative side. And my daddy was very good at maths, and then naturally I was quite good at maths as well. And I think as I got through school and college, I was quite good. So when I did my maths, I actually did one of my maths GCSEs a year early, and I took an additional maths exam, statistics as well, compared to the people. So I think I kind of like the maths, physics, kind of science, IT side of things. And then when I was at university, I did my A-levels in maths, physics, and IT. And I used to, sell CDs and, do all sorts of techie things. And as I grew older, I used to try and fix Xboxes with.
So you were quite entrepreneurial, quite young then as well.
Yeah. I used to try and do things like that. I used to build PCs, and my friends used to always ask me for IT things. So I kind of like that route.
So that was the plan, was it? Go down the IT route to start with?
Yeah, so I liked computing, so I think I went down that computing route. I wasn't sure, what the different career paths were there. Now it's changed a lot, but when I was younger, I wasn't sure where that goes. But I knew I liked computing and technology. So when I did my university choices, I selected electronic and software engineering because I like the coding side than some of the other side of IT, because IT is a broad field. So I like the programming side. So I went to University of Leicester, and I did electronic and software engineering there as my degree. And then I finished that, and I actually went on to do a job as a software engineer. In particular, embedded software engineering. So for those who don't know, embedded software engineering is actually coding processors in machines. So it's not like software that runs on a computer. It's kind of actually machine code. So I think fortunate for me, when I got to university, I did do a bit of part-time work for like IT support and various other jobs just to bring money in. But my main career job was writing software for machines in food factories.
PLCs we used to call them years ago.
So PLCs were quite good, but what I was doing was more kind of microcontrollers. So we were controlling motors, conveyors, protocols, touchscreens. So I was coding in C and Java, a bit of C#, and my small claim to fame is every pack of Walker's crisps you eat has gone across the machine that I've written a bit of code for. I've been in Mondelez factories, but Mars, Baby Bell, most food major factories I've been in, and the company I worked for sold machines across EMEA, so that's Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Russia. It was
Gary Lineker really needs to thank you then for.
I wouldn't go that far. But the machine I was writing the code for was one that checks the weight. So within EU law, food has to be within a certain weight. So this was a machine with a conveyor belt. Food will go across the conveyor belt, and as it's going across, it'll measure the weight. So I was writing some code for that. And
Strangely enough, I remember about 2 weeks ago, some woman had bought a multi-pack of crisps, and it was in the news because she'd actually got a bag of Walker's crisps that was completely empty. So I'm not sure if you had a software failure or whether there was an issue with the mechanical weighing part of the machine that you did before. But I remember seeing that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. I don't know what would have happened there, but sometimes things do happen. But they try their best to try to make sure that doesn't happen, and there's lots of quality checks in place. And I've been in the food factory and the food machines, and there is a lot of people do try and make a difference and an impact. So it must have just purely been accident in that case.
So coming back to the IT jobs, I've worked in IT all my life, and a lot of people, when you talk to them about IT, they assume you just do one thing, which is fix somebody's PC. They think that's all that computers are, is PCs, but there is a world of computing, isn't there? And it's so diverse, and the jobs within it are so diverse as well. From people are doing architectural look at computing, how things fit together. That's local or in a cloud environment. There's security analysts. There's people looking at software development, but there's all the project management activity around it. There's so many different jobs, within IT that people get a bit confused that it's always support jobs looking after somebody's PC, but that's not the case.
No, it's not the case at all. And I think there is tons out there, and even now, I've lost track because there's so many different languages, so many different things. I think it's quite funny because when I had an opportunity to go and interview at GHCQ as well at the time, and I didn't take it because I had the offer from this other company, and I kind of think, what would my career path would have been if I would have worked there, because this would have been completely different because it's more communication led. But I think it's one of those things that there's, especially the younger generation, when you speak to them, they're like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I think there's so many things now, especially there's VR, AR, there's animation, there's film, there's CGIs, there's network engineering, and there's Unix, Linux. There's so many different things that are out there that you can do in terms of development, and especially mobile apps. That's another whole world as well.
AI and machine learning. There's now the new world of cloud ready, cloud first type technologies like Kubernetes and containers. It's a very different world to what it used to be. I was a Coral and Fortran programmer, if you remember Coral and Fortran, which was a long time ago. They're not languages that are commonly used these days because of procedural languages, rather than most things are object orientated these days, and there's a lot of drive towards no code as well, or minimal code.
So it's quite interesting. So when I was there, because it was a Japanese sister company as well, I worked in Japan for a few weeks, and I've been to Japan about 4, 5, 6 times, and I really love the culture there. And I think with that company, as I got out on the field more, and engineers would call me up and customers would call me up, so I started to get out in the field more, and I kind of enjoyed more of that. And I think naturally I was very good at communicating the technical side to the commercial side, and vice versa. So I hear the customer's problems and needs and come back and go, actually, you want this, this is what you want the software to do. Because a lot of it was bespoke, and that's what we were doing. And I was really good at that, and I enjoyed that. And I thought to myself and said, what, I can't see myself sitting in front of a desk programming for the rest of my life. I know some people enjoy that, but I felt that different, and I wanted to get out more. And after doing 7 years on that role of programming, there's a position came up, and I got into a bit of a sales development role. So then I was working
like a pre-sales role, so technical pre-sales, so working with a customer, looking at the technology, but also with a commercial perspective as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so for that particular machine, I knew it inside out. So then I got into more of a sales development. So I was supporting all the agents, distributors, and local sales guys across EMEA. So I'd go out to Moscow, Russia, Poland, Lithuania, France, Germany, wherever you call it.
You're well traveled then.
Yeah, I traveled a lot. Yes, I've traveled a lot. I met different people, and you learn a lot about culture as well, and how guys in Germany think different to the guys in France versus the guys in Spain, to the guys in Japan or Russia or Moscow, and everybody does business differently, and you kind of learn about what they're looking for in a product or a solution, and that was a great learning experience for me. And what I did there was work with those different areas, and I wasn't teaching them how to sell, but I was just working with them on the products and what feeding back to the engineers, kind of R&D, and say, look, this is new, we have to develop this, or this has become an issue, or this is what's happening in the market, and this is what we should be thinking about going forward. And then again, naturally from that, I got into product management for that product. So not project, but product. A lot of people always get confused between the two. So product management is all about, looking at the market strategy, R&D development, product roadmaps, what are we developing next, what's the product life cycle.
Understanding customer need as well, and making sure that you're aligned with customer need, which is sometimes a bit of a challenge for a lot of people.
100%, yeah, because a lot of people just push products, but they don't really understand what is happening and what are the needs and the wants and the benefits and the features and where things are going. So I got into that role, and the company was great. I got a qualification from the Chartered Institute of Marketing, and I ended up getting a diploma in training as well. So again, I was going across all over the world, training the sales guys on the products that we were launching and feeding back to the engineering team and kind of developing a roadmap and releasing different products, etc. And then I went from that one product to another machine, which is an X-ray machine. So again, it's X-ray machine in the food sector that will check for not metals but other types of solids, so hard plastics, hard rubbers, bone, for example, in chicken, various different things. So I did that, and so long story short, I was at that company for about 10 years, straight after university, and I felt I needed a change. So then I got a role as a global product manager. So again, instead of doing EMEA, I went globally, and this was a company based in Aylesbury, where it was X-ray machines for semiconductors and electronics. So think of it as a big box. You open the door, you put a circuit board in, it is a full CT scan, and then you can, on the computer screen, cut through and look at voids and joints. So customers here are high-end electronics, military, medical, anything where you don't want something to fail. So electronics in cars, missiles, premium electronics devices. So again, I did the product branding, strategy, pricing, and I launched a machine in China, America, all sorts of looked at pricing in different countries. So I did all that, but I was there for about a year, and I felt that I was commuting every day. The company was a big $1 billion American conglomerate, and I just felt it wasn't right for me. And then from there, I moved into a bit of sales. I got into CRM, ERP, mainly Microsoft products. That was a company based in Cambridge. Again, I was traveling loads. The company got bought out. Things changed. And then I went to another company, back into product management, but mainly product marketing management, for a company in Redditch that did black boxes for trains, so data recorders. So imagine a plane, you have an accident, you pull out the flight recorder. You have the same thing on a train, basically. So again, because of my background in electronics and engineering, I was quite suited to that, because it was all about analog digital signals and data. And we were doing work with universities, knowledge transfers with different train companies. We were looking at AI, pulling off data remotely, how you can use data for analytics, predictive analytics, doing AI, doing all sorts of fancy stuff.
Yeah, because that's an area that's become very big these days, and I think a lot of people see AI as like I forgot the name, it's StarNet or whatever it was called, and the Terminator. But in reality, AI has been used for many different things, and in technology, we use AI and machine learning for predictive analytics to understand if things are going to fail and try and do something about before they fail, so that things don't fail at all. But AI has been used for so many different things in medical research, isn't it? It's used a lot for actually looking at medical imagery and actually looking through and actually doing a diagnosis from it, because it's much faster, but it can operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, whereas a radiologist only works a standard shift of maybe 8 hours, particular days in a week. So there's some real advantages. Plus also, I think in radiology, I think it was King's College were using AI for radiology, and they were looking at, instead of 2.5 hours to go through an examination and look at an MRI scan for a brain tumor, they could do it in 30 minutes using AI. So there's some real advantages of AI. It's not just going to take over the world and destroy us. So there's some actual benefits as well.
I think sometimes people watch too many movies, but I think
Skynet taking over.
Yes, definitely. I think there's pros and cons, but I think people need to think past that. And if you look back in the past, and when, say, the internet started, you look at the headlines and the newspapers like, what is this fad? What is this bubble? The internet's going to take off. Everyone's going to lose their jobs, but it's nothing like that. Or if somebody said in the old days, humans will fly in the sky, we would have thought you're bonkers. If you had look at electric cars, if you spoke to somebody 15, 20 years ago, so we're going to have cars that are electric, or cars that will drive themselves.
I remember milk floats, don't you? these quiet
Yeah,
things used to travel around the streets with
yeah,
bottles of white liquid and put them on your doorstep.
yeah, yeah,
So there were electric vehicles around many years ago, but not
yeah.
quite as sophisticated as
No,
today.
not a mass market yet, but especially like self-driving cars. If
Yeah,
you said that to somebody, they'll think you're nuts. But again, look at the way technology's gone, and you look at the trying to avoid saying the word, but I'm going to have to, like things like Alexa or Google. Try not to set somebody's Alexa
yeah. I
off.
know. I was thinking, is mine going to go off over here?
Yeah. Madam M, or I should Madam A, I think that's the right word I should say. Words like technology like that, you wouldn't have thought about it many years ago. And people might get scared, saying, "Look, they're listening in, and what's going to happen." But I think it's evolving and changing, and we need to look beyond that going forward. Going off track, coming back into where I was. So that company I worked for, it went bust essentially. So I got made redundant in the middle of 2019. When that happened, I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? And for me, those years of traveling and kind of working for big companies, I felt, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And, where is my purpose in life? And I think the more I thought about it, it kind of brought me back to about 2001, 2002. When I was at university, I got diagnosed with a medical condition called ulcerative colitis. So ulcerative colitis is an ulcer in your large colon. It's classed as a disease, an autoimmune disease. In the medical field, they don't know why it happens. And because of that reason, there is no cure. Worst case scenario, they kind of cut out your large intestine and do various operations. In between, sometimes people have stomach bags. It does mess up the things you can eat, and it does make you run to the loo a lot. And at the time when I was getting diagnosed, I was in a hospital bed for a month on a drip with no food, and I was literally skin and bones, just weighing like 8 stones. And I think fortunately for me, I came out without needing any surgery, but I do take medication every day, and I have had various flare-ups, throughout my life. But I kind of look back at that and think, actually, I'm quite fortunate. There's people out there who are less fortunate than me in many different ways. And I always think back, you know what, here I am, I've got my head screwed on. I can do so much more than other people can't. What am I doing to make a difference to the people, planet, society where I am? So I've been trying to find, what is my purpose and what can I do to make a difference to people? And that's when I tried to do other things. And I was dabbling in selling stuff on Amazon and eBay and, doing other kind of, entrepreneurial adventures and seeing what I can do. But purely, I was doing it all for the wrong reasons, because it was just for money. And I wasn't really pushing, through the barriers there. And I just gave up really easy, because again, it was just for money and I wasn't happy. And I think that's what it boiled down to. I just wasn't happy. And I think when I got made redundant, then I thought, okay, now's my opportunity to try something. So I did a few things on the side. I was trying to get into property development, because we did our own house up and I enjoyed that. As I said, I like being hands-on. I'm quite creative. I like doing DIY. I like doing woodworking. I'm quite handy with stuff like that. And then COVID came along kind of early 2020, and then situations changed with my wife in what she was doing. So my wife, she's an architect, and she's always been an architect. She did her 7 to 10 year qualifications to become an architect. And then, things changed. I won't go into all of that, but essentially we said, why don't we set up on our own? Because her well-being was being affected, where she used to work and commute. And I said, look, why don't we come together? You use your skills, I'll use my skills, and we could do something. But we both said, we don't want to be your typical architect practice. We want to do something actually, again, purposeful, meaningful, and something that's going to change people or make an impact. And the more we looked into it, the more we thought about, actually, can we not design properties or buildings around people's health and well-being? And that's when we saw, lots of research. There's tons of research out there. And the biggest ones that stuck is that, 1 in 4 people suffer with mental health issues. And one of the biggest factors is the environment you're in. And you spend about 85% of your time indoors in an environment, whether it's commercial or residential. And then we came across the global well building standard, which is scientific backed research about how building design can affect your well-being.
I remember years ago, people used to talk about sick buildings. So
Yes. Yeah.
where
Yeah.
the lighting was poor, the natural light was poor, the air
Yeah.
conditioning and circulation was poor in buildings,
Yeah.
and it would actually make people ill. And
Yeah.
that was a common thing between the 70s and 80s. These sick buildings would actually
Yeah.
make people ill. So it is a big drive now, isn't it, for people to
Yeah.
actually find well places to work. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of organisations are trying to drive that. I think I mentioned to you in the past that I think it was last year or the year before was the first death attributed to air quality in the
Mm.
UK. So
Yeah.
that's a big change, isn't it?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and at the moment it is increasing. The amount of problems with poor air quality within buildings and surrounding areas due to traffic pollution and things. I know we're doing a lot of work to do it. And Birmingham
Mm.
introduced the pollution low what's
Clean
it
air
called,
zone.
low emission zone, wasn't it, recently?
Yeah.
And in London you've got low emission and ultra low emission depending on where
Yeah.
you are in London as well. So there is a big drive to try and reduce that. So how's that moved on then? So what kind of things are you doing that's going to make a difference with a building to actually make sure that it's actually a better place to live or to work?
Yeah, good question. So there's like 100 different things that we look at in terms of what can be done, and a couple of examples are you take light, because everybody understands light, but people think it's just you want more light, but it's actually the color of the light, the reflective glare of light, the luminosity of light, the quality of the light, and sometimes actually in a bedroom you actually don't want light, and then you got stuff like acoustic noise, you got particle matter in the air. If you're using man-made materials, they give off gases called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. So again, you might want to use natural material like wood and granite, for example, if you're doing a kitchen worktop. People forget about, say, thermal comfort. Everybody wants bifolding doors in a room, but they don't realize that actually when it's summer, it's going to be really hot. Then what you're going to do to cool down, what happens with storage space, acoustic noise, pollution. So again, we try to design in where you got, say porches, for example, to reduce the pollution noise, or we try to indirectly design in if you've got a utility room where you get less noise in the living room. We look at the sun path around a building and look at where you're going to get the most natural light. We've done like a green wall within the kitchen where you're growing your own herbs, so it encourages more healthy eating, more biophilia. There's a property we did where we did like a herb garden because I've got little children. So it means they can grow their own vegetables, smell their own vegetables, and encourage more healthy eating. So things like that. So they don't have to be complicated, but there's lots of different things you can do. If you've got a bigger project and a bigger budget, you might actually look at things like water filtration, the impact of formaldehyde in water. You might have mechanical ventilation instead of natural ventilation. So it depends on the project and the scenario, what you could do. And again, with a commercial property, you might actually put steps in as well as a ramp for disability access, but you might encourage people to actually walk more. So you might make a path where it encourages people to walk more, but also at the same time, maybe bump into people that encourages more interactivity. So you're not, on your own, you're meeting people, bump into people.
Yeah.
You want to frame views where you see more outdoor, indoor. We're seeing a lot of that at the moment as well. People care about that. And I think that's the kind of things that are happening and things you can do from, the well-being side. But there's a lot of different things that you can go into. And the well building standard initially started from office blocks. So the idea there was to certify a building where it encourages more staff retention and more productivity. And what we've done is, by taking that qualification, is actually applying that to also residential properties. And last year during pandemic, they were actually put a group of people together as they called it Well Home Advisory Role, where they were looking at how they could bring this into residential property. So my wife was part of that home advisory scheme and was jumping on every month with people all around the world looking at how they can bring this more into residential properties. And we were kind of doing it anyway.
Do you think a lot of property developers are doing this, or do you think people are doing this more of a tick box exercise to look like they're doing it and they're actually not doing it? Because I find a lot of times in business, people do things for the wrong reasons. So they may want to do things as a tick box exercise to look like they're actually being green and a bit of greenwashing, as it were. But actually, they're not doing anything that makes a difference to the people that occupy the buildings they create.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's also maybe a lack of knowledge or misunderstanding. They're not doing it deliberately. And there are people out there genuinely who want to make an impact, but they're not sure how to do that. And I think it's funny, a lot of people we speak to, they all think it's a bit like, feng shui, where it's all interior design. But I tell people it's not. It's nothing like that. Interior design does have an impact, but a lot of it is the fabric of the building and how it engages into all together. And I do see a lot of developers who think, oh, isn't this going to cost me more? And we say not necessarily. If you think about it beforehand and you plan it in, it doesn't have to. Just being smart. Yes, if you want to, go to the next level, and the next level it might cost you more, but it doesn't
it's
have
like
to
retro. If you try and retrofit anything, it's always more expensive than actually building it as part of the actual initial plan.
Yeah. And I think, research from, say, I think it's the UK Green Building Council. They did a research study a while back, and they said actually homeowners are willing to spend 30% more on a property if it's better for their well-being, because everybody knows health is wealth, and that's more important. So if you had two properties next to each other, but one is designed around well-being purposefully, which one are you looking to purchase? Obviously value has to be there, but it depends on how that's structured and how it's put together. And I think it's just understanding that. I think people kind of misunderstand that.
It's a challenging world we live in, isn't it? To balance between doing the right thing and also the commercial aspects of things as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think also, yeah.
So give us, anything particular that you think is really important that you're looking at now or will become in the future as well? Because we've talked about, trying to make things more healthy, herb gardens, walkways and things. But what do you think is going to become more important as we move forward, especially with, some of the plans that a lot of people are looking at reducing emissions by 2025 by reducing cars and, that are, internal combustion engines and things like that. What do you think is important for the next 5 years in construction of buildings that's going to be really important to the organizations doing that?
I think you see a lot now about net zero carbon, and I think the next step from that is actually net positive carbon, so you're actually taking away more than you're putting back in. And I think that's the way things should be looked at, and I think it's just being creative with what you're doing with a project. And I think every small change can make a big impact, and everybody's pushing to different schemes. But I think it's looking at it in harmony and in balance. Using sustainable material, trying to avoid embodied carbon, which is kind of products that might have a lot of carbon when you manufacture something, and then maybe using wood more than concrete. Looking at more natural heating, air source heat pumps, for example. Looking at using solar power, and obviously all the new homes now have EV charging points. So I think it's all looking at where the trends are, where things are going, and we're seeing a lot of people now moving out of the city. Want to have properties where there's more green space, more people working from home, people traveling, probably not as much as they used to, but when they are traveling, they're being a bit more conscious of where they're going, what they're doing, and the method they're taking. And I think again with the electric cars, that's helped with breaking down some of the barriers that people were after in terms of what's available. But I think
just picking on a couple of those things, I think because of people have been working from the last 2 years, is that going to change, say, the residential property people to think, actually new properties in future we need to really think about a home office rather than just some properties, the larger properties having an office. What if we start to actually put that in as a standard piece, because a lot of people are still working from home and will do way into the future. You mentioned EVs. It's going to be very, very difficult if we don't have more electric charging points for those. I've moved over to that, and I think it's a critical part that you've got that EV infrastructure in place. And you mentioned about heat source heat pumps and things like that. We're working with BDR Thermia and the Baxi at the moment, and they're looking at moving away from the traditional heating systems that they currently manufacture towards heating as a service or comfort as a service potentially. So not having to think about, I'm actually buying a boiler and the boiler, then if it goes, I have to have it serviced, or if it goes wrong, I get somebody in to fix it. Actually what I do is I contract to have heat in my home, or heat or cooling it could be, because you never know in the future, especially if the climate does change, we might end up in a situation where air conditioning is actually something we see more often in residential homes. It's not as common, is it? But in commercial commercial properties, it's quite common nowadays, where it didn't used to be in the past. So yeah, it is going to be quite an interesting future. So how do you fit into that? So who do you work with predominantly? Who is your customer? Is it, the actual company that's, thinking about, building a building, or is it the construction company who are actually doing it? Is it the architects? Who do you actually deal with directly?
Yeah, so we are a small architect firm, so we started about, as I said, 2 years ago during COVID. And I think the interesting thing there is that my wife, she's worked on churches, temples, listed buildings, 60-block apartments, medical grade facilities with operational suites. So she's done a lot, and she kind of worked across the whole field. But I think with our niche and what we're looking for, we're looking to work with homeowners who got from mainly designer-led homes where they want something creative. People who care about sustainability and well-being, but also then on the commercial side, we're trying to do more work with hospices, care homes, people who are really looking after like social housing, where the tenants are important and the well-being is important. So we're looking at more commercial projects. We are doing some commercial projects in the city as well, but again, we've got a mixed bag, and we're trying to connect with people who are developers and who are trying to make an impact. I think that's the biggest thing for us, and that's our core mission and vision, is to actually, our kind of tagline is design well, live better. And what we're trying to do, is sustainably design for better living, well-being, health and happiness. So it's trying to find who else believes in what we believe in.
So I would have thought cultural compatibility is a key thing for you, finding another organisations have got the same goals and aims as you have, to make sure that you can work together in harmony to actually deliver better places for people to live or work. I think that's going to be key, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve this problem in the market of, this is what's happening. And for us, is like, anybody can do a drawing. And I always tell people that we don't do drawings, we change lives, and we're trying to change lives by the way we work and how we work and what we do. My wife's very detailed and meticulous in the drawings we do. And, we're not the cheapest in the market. And we tell customers, look, you're trying to save a couple of £1,000s up front, but then you're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on the building. Don't you want to get everything up front? So you're saving time, quality, and kind of questions later on, because it doesn't make sense. So, and I think because we've got that multi-sector experience, and we've got the WELL accreditation, and we're part of the Royal Institute of British Architects, we've got a lot of credibility and USP. And I think the other thing I try to tell people is we're quite entrepreneurial, and that's mainly because I push that side of the business. No disrespect to other architects, but they're taught by architects, run businesses like architects, whereas I kind of come in and see things from my background and push things and say, actually, what can we do that's different? I've been part of the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator Program, the Aston Business School SME program, and various other programs. And for me, it's always, again, from product management days, what's happening in the market? What can we do that's different? Everything's cloud-based. We use tablets. We're exploring with VR. We're happy to do collaboration. We're very open. We're happy to work with other architect firms, other construction companies, project managers, QSs, anybody out there. We're happy to work with them, because for us, it's, are you helping us with our mission and vision to make a difference to people? And all we want to do is just work and live a happy life at the end of the day. And I think that's what our kind of vision and mission is. And my personal long-term goal is to kind of get into philanthropy and kind of, do good, make a difference. But I know it takes time, so it's kind of small steps, getting there.
I think anything in life, though, you've got to take time, but it is like you say, very good to give back. So everything that you've gained, you can give something back on it. We were talking earlier, about I do the Air Cadets, and that's my way of giving back, because I gained something from that organisation when I was younger, and I want to make sure I give back as well. And I think that's something we can all do if we given the opportunity. But again, it all depends on people's lives. They don't always have that opportunity to be able to have time to do these things. But I think it is very, very important that you can give something back to society, whether you're helping out with other entrepreneurs to try and be successful, whether it's going down the route of philanthropy. My mouth isn't working properly at the moment. And actually putting your money where your mouth is as well, and doing something that's actually going to do good for others as well, because I think that's really important as well. So couple of final things then. So what do you think is going to be what you're doing at the moment you think is going to make the biggest impact on in this area?
I think it's good question. I think it's more going to be around education. I think people don't understand what does well-being and design mean. So I think one thing I need to do more of is actually write a bit more blogs and topics and say, look, this is what it means, this is what's happening, and again, kind of work with people who we can collaborate with, because I think 2 or 3 heads are better than one, and at the end of the day, it's the client's best interest, and we're really open to that. So we're trying to break down their barriers. I know there's people out there who just want to work on their own and think we're going to steal business, but that's just not who we are. And I hope people can see that. So for me, it's kind of getting the name and the word out there and say, look, this is what we're looking to do, and we're trying to make a difference. Are there people out there who believe in what we believe in? And let's have a conversation, really.
Well, that might be of interest because we're looking to do a couple of events that are focused at construction and building management, for property developers as well, and talking about the kind of things you can do that are different, like smart technologies for buildings. And it might be something we can collaborate on and have something that talks about, wellness in those spaces as well as part of that. So we'll have to have a conversation afterwards and see what we can do collaboratively.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's quite important understanding, from a client's perspective, their use case and why they're doing what they're doing. And, it always reminds me, I don't know if how many people know this, but Toyota, when they were doing the car manufacturing, they have something called the 5 whys. And when something would broke, and they always ask why, like a child. So let's say a car breaks down, you'll say, why is it broken down? And they go, okay, this pipe came loose. Why did this pipe become loose? Because it wasn't tightened. Okay, why wasn't it tightened? And he'd be like, okay, because the staff didn't know what torque to tighten the grommet. So by asking why so many times, you get to the root cause. It's like a root cause analysis. So I always apply that. And when I was in the rail sector, we were, working on some wireless sensors for trains to measure certain parameters. And I talked to one of the engineers, and he'd be like, well, okay, we want to put this in for 6 months and trial it. And I'll be like, why? And he goes, to get this data. I was like, why? And he said, to prove the data comes off. And I was like, why? And he didn't know. And it's just because they always did it. And I said, well, what if we put it in the factory and we showed you the data coming off? What if we put it in the train for 2 weeks and we show you the data coming off? Why does it have to be 6 months? So it's kind of drilling down into why they've done stuff. And sometimes you realize that people just do things because they've always been doing things that way. Yeah. And I think once you start asking clients why they do
things, change is a challenge for a lot of people. So, they tend to do the things the way they did because that's how it's always been done. And they don't really adopt change. And I think sometimes you do need to adopt change, to actually improve, don't you?
Yeah. And that's I guess the kind of spin I try to put on the projects we work on, and really push, clients and whoever we're working with, and try to get deep down and say, what are their needs, wants, and actual challenges, and what can we do to help? And I think that's the kind of spin we're trying to work on going forward, really, and say, what can we do? And I think that's why we're looking at VR, and we do a lot of 3D models these days and renders, because clients can't visualize their project. So we're doing a lot of that so people can visualize what the project looks like. So we're trying to break down the barriers, essentially.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse recently, and there are actually people buying spots of virtual land to put things on to sell stuff in the metaverse. So that's going to be quite an interesting thing as we go forward. But I think we've been here before anyway. A long time ago, there was a thing called Second Life. A lot of people may not have heard about, but it was something that was done about 20 years ago. I think for us, maybe 15 years ago, where people had this virtual environment that they could have a second life in. And a lot of organizations did build things. I think Oracle built a big building there, and they used to have conferences in Second Life and lots of other things like that. So the metaverse is not the first iteration. It may be third or fourth iteration of this kind of virtual world that we can go into and create an alternative life for ourselves in.
I think I was gonna say, I think there is some value in that, depending on how it's used. So I know in America there's a company that set up a virtual store where people can go into the virtual store, purchase something, and it'll actually ship it to your real address. And then I know, like, for example, some of the fashion brands, they're creating virtual stores where you can actually virtually see the clothing, and then you can buy it and it gets shipped to your address. But because I've got a virtual headset and I'm in various different groups, and there's a lady in there who said she's in a wheelchair and she struggles to get out and suffers from anxiety. But actually having the virtual headset has allowed her to communicate with people and get out there and express herself. So that's kind of been a bit of a lifesaver for her. So I think there's different, again, use cases for the technology. So I think it's got some legs in that, but it might take time to get to where everybody wants to get to.
Yeah, I think augmented reality as well is going to be a big thing for the future, and
Yeah.
whether it's signage to help you as you're walking on to find somewhere because it's going to come up
Yes.
on your
Yeah.
smart sunglasses, or
Yeah.
if you're actually working back in the industrial compute piece we were talking about earlier, so you're looking at a piece of equipment and you can
Yeah.
actually look and see some values of it and reconfigure it by looking through it
Yeah.
to some kind of augmented reality interface. So there's going to be a lot of things in the future
Yeah.
that's going to make life very, very different. But
Yeah.
again, it's each time we get these new things, we've got to see if they're actually of value, because not
Yes.
always they actually improve our lives, do they?
Yeah.
They just sometimes become just another thing that's been done that dies on the vine, and
Yeah.
we don't do it again. So we've got to see how it goes. So
Yeah.
I did ask you a couple of questions before we started that we're going to ask at the end. So one of them was, tell us the best meal you've ever had, where it was, and why. So can you give us that one first?
I think I was thinking about this quite a bit. I've traveled a lot, and I've tried a lot of different food in a lot of different countries, and there's so many that come to mind. I could probably name like two or three at the top of my head. But the very recent one I think was in Sorrento, Italy,
Oh yeah,
where we actually had spaghetti, but it was truffle spaghetti, and it just tasted so nice, and it was so simple.
yeah.
And the taste,
We
like,
went on our
really
honeymoon
good.
to Sorrento, but that was a
Oh, I
while
love it.
ago, just over 25 years ago. So
Yeah.
it might have been a slightly different place 25 years ago.
Yes, yes. But the food there was amazing, and that one
Yeah.
stood out really. So yeah, that's the one I enjoyed the most.
So the other question was, tell us something that you've done that's adventurous, and it's down to you. So it's what's adventurous to you. So what have you done that you feel is adventurous?
Um, a good, really good question as well. And I did think about that, and I think the one that stood out when you were talking was I did a bit of well, I don't say I did it, but we went whitewater rafting in Sri Lanka.
Oh yeah,
But I wasn't actually paddling. There was somebody else doing it. We were just sitting in the boat essentially.
you were just hanging on for grim
We were just
death.
hanging on, yeah. And it was so scary. I don't know what grade it was, but you can actually see water dripping and rocks sticking out and cliffs, and we were all over the place. And my heart was going. So I think that was the most kind of scary thing that comes to mind.
Well, I
So
think
far,
that's
yeah,
definitely adventurous if it makes your heart
yeah,
beat faster.
yeah,
Definitely adventurous.
yeah,
We've
yeah,
got a few different things, with bungee jumping, people
yeah,
with jet skiing with sharks, all
yeah,
sorts of things. But it's interesting to see what people see as adventurous as well, because not everybody has the same perception of what
yeah,
adventure is as well. So really good. But thanks ever so much for joining us today. We've been putting information up on the screen, so at the bottom just gone past is Rachel and I, our details. So if anybody wants to actually join us and tell people about your journey and what you've done in your life, and also about the business you're in at the moment, and promote your business, contact us, Rachel or myself. Our emails at the bottom. We've also been putting up some details about Mitesh as well. So if you want to contact Mitesh, we've got his LinkedIn and also website details on there. So make sure that you contact Mitesh if you're interested in knowing more about what we're doing. We've also got a number of other sessions. So we've got Majinda Kang this week. Next week, we've also got a couple more people. We've got John Andrews, and we've also got, I think it's Neil Jinks as well on next week. So Tuesday and Thursday next week. So join us for those. We also post some as videos on YouTube. So at some stage, we'll have to put our YouTube channel details on the bottom. We've not quite got round to it yet, but you'll have to subscribe to our YouTube channel and see them. We're just trying to get people to know more about other people's journeys through life and also their businesses. So it's great to do this. But if you can stay on afterwards, and Mitesh, and we'll have a quick wash up at the end, and then we'll catch up with everyone else on Thursday when we've got our next speaker. Right.
sure.
Thanks ever so much for everybody for joining us today, and have a great Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a
you,
lot.
Lee.